Hey, church family, Pastor David here, and I wanted to continue to give some devotionals in this new year, 2025, particularly devotionals this important week where we both celebrated the birthday of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, and we saw a pivotal time in our nation's history as we transitioned from one government to another government administration. What I wanted to do today is give you a devotional from 1 John chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. Let me read that, and then I'll just say a couple of comments that hopefully will be encouraging to you. We know what real love is because Jesus gave up his life for us. So we ought to give up our lives for our brothers and sisters. If someone has enough money to live well and then sees a brother or sister in need but shows no compassion, how can God's love be in that person? Dear children, let us not merely say that we love each other. Let us show this truth by our actions. I think about this call to show our love, not just in words, which are cheap, but in our actions. I think first and foremost of the actions that God did, and when he demonstrated his love by sending his son Jesus. God wasn't content just to say, I love you to his children. He demonstrated his love with sacrificial action by sending Jesus to live a sacrificial life, to die a sacrificial death, so that we could be reconciled to God. And also, as I think about the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King and Sister Coretta Scott King, the church that we worship in, West Charlotte Church at Freedom, we could not even exist. We would not be allowed to exist if it wasn't for the sacrificial love in actions, the sacrificial fight of Dr. Martin Luther King, Coretta Scott King, and many others who fought the fight for racial justice and racial reconciliation. And so in a sense, we as members of West Charlotte Church, we have both the privilege of benefiting from his legacy, but we also have a calling and burden to continue his legacy. And what do we do? What does it mean to continue the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King? Well, it means to love, not just with words, but in action. We have a God who calls us as Christians to share his love through words of gospel, words of witness, words of sharing Jesus with those around us. But we're to do that as we love in action. The reality is we live in a world where trust is low. And so one of the ways that we as Christians earn the trust, earn the right to share the gospel with our neighbors is by demonstrating our love for our neighbors with good works. I also think about, in light of this governmental transition, some people who have concerns at this current time of transition, a lot of times the concerns are expressed about the hurting in our communities. What's going to happen at a time of transition to the hurting amongst us, maybe whether it's immigrants, whether it's under-resourced, what's going to happen to the hurting? And I want to say that while governmental policy absolutely is important, which is one of the reasons why we exercise our God-given right to vote, however, we also have a wonderful privilege to pray as Christians, pray for the hurting around us, pray for those in our communities who are in need. The Lord is the champion of those who are humble, who are hurting. He loves to care for those who are vulnerable. And so we join him as we pray on their behalf. But not just prayer, right? We want to love in action. And so one of the things that 1 John calls us to is to put our money where our mouth is, put our efforts and our energy where our mouth is. Let's not just say that we care about the hurting around us, but let's actually do something. Live sacrificially, live intentionally, care for those around us. And as we do that, first and foremost, we're reflecting the love of God, who is a God who loves in action. And of course, we're continuing the legacy of our fathers and mothers in the faith. Fathers like Dr. Martin Luther King and many others who have loved intentionally and sacrificially. But we also earn the right to share the gospel with those around us by our love in action. So you might be thinking, so what do I do? Well, if you're a member of West Charlotte Church, you know that we're involved in the community in a lot of different ways. And so I'll just point out a couple of ways that you could be involved. We have partnerships with organizations like Young Lives. We are partners with a local church that oversees a food pantry. We have partnerships with prison fellowship ministries. We have a good relationship with a church that does an after-school mentoring program and discipleship program called A Better World. There are many local schools that we have connections in. And if you're interested in volunteering to teach, to tutor, to mentor students, there are so many ways in which you can practically serve. You could also help us at West Charlotte Church by helping us plan for and executing an outreach event. Every year, we try to find different ways in which we can connect with our neighbors in our community. But we need your help to do some of those things. So, family, as we set into 2025, I just want to encourage you, remember the call that God gives us to love genuinely, not just with words, but with actions. Have a great day. Have a blessed 2025.